Derringer. John Wilkes Booth walked into Ford's Theater in 1865 with a tiny percussion pistol that fit in the palm of his hand. .44 caliber, 3-inch barrel, one single shot. He used it to assassinate the President of the United States at point-blank range, then dropped the gun on the floor as he ran. They say he fell during the escape and broke his leg, but that's got nothing to do with the gun. Henry Derringer had been making these pistols in Philadelphia since the 1820s. Percussion, single shot, loaded from the muzzle with black powder and a lead ball. Sold in pairs, because with black powder, counting on a single shot actually firing was a little too optimistic. The design got copied so much that Derringer, with 2 R's, a misspelling of the inventor's name, became the generic term for any pocket pistol. Derringer spent his entire life suing knockoffs, and never stopped a single one. In 1866, Remington released the over-under version in .41 rimfire, 2 stacked barrels, 2 shots without reloading. More modern, same idea. A gun that didn't show up until it was needed. Out west, Derringers were the guns of gamblers, doctors, off-duty sheriffs. The unspoken rule in saloons went like this. If you could see all of someone's weapons, you probably hadn't seen them all. In any kind of fair fight, the Derringer is useless. It was useless in 1865 too, except in the only 3 situations where anyone would actually use one. Booth found all 3. It's also the doctor's gun in Django, if you were wondering. Colt Single Action Army. The U.S. Army chose the Colt in .45 Colt. 6 shots, solid frame. External hammer you cocked before every shot. Simple enough to fix in the field with a pocket knife. Tough enough to keep working through sand, mud, and complete neglect. By 1878, Colt was making the SAA in .44-40, the same caliber as the Winchester 1873. Revolver and rifle, same ammunition, same box. Out in the middle of nowhere with no resupply coming, one less thing to worry about meant something real. Wyatt Earp carried one at the gunfight at the OK Corral. Robert Ford used one to shoot Jesse James in the back in 1882. The same gun on both sides of everything the West stood for. Smith and Wesson Schofield. The U.S. Army bought around 8,000 Schofields, then figured out that standard Colt ammunition didn't fit the chamber, scrapped the whole thing and went back to the Colt. Jesse James kept the gun the Army threw away, and used it across 26 bank robberies and 7 train heists. The advantage was real. The Colt SAA reloaded 1 round at a time through a side gate. The Schofield broke open like a shotgun, and a star extractor ejected all 6 casings at once. For people whose whole job was getting in and getting out fast, every second counted. Henry Rifle, 1860. The U.S. Army refused to adopt the Henry in 1860. The argument was that soldiers would waste ammunition with that kind of capacity. 16 rounds of .4 for rimfire, 28 shots per minute. The Army's single-shot muskets reloaded 3 or 4 times in that same window. The Army called it wasteful. The people getting shot at disagreed. Soldiers who bought one with their own money and survived the Civil War had a different take on waste. The Sioux called it the rifle you load on Sunday and shoot all week, and they didn't mean it as a compliment. Benjamin Henry never saw a cent in royalties for what came after. The company bought the rights, improved the design, put another man's name on the gun, and made money off it for decades. The Winchester exists because the Henry existed. Henry existed and ended up with nothing. Winchester Model, 1873. The Winchester was the Henry, improved by the same company that bought the rights. Stronger receiver, up to 15 rounds of .44-40, a mechanism that could handle higher pressure. The sound of the lever cycling became the sound of the Western. Leone used it as a score before there was even a shot fired on screen. The .44-40 was also the caliber of the Colt SAA. 1 box of ammunition for the rifle and the revolver. Jesse James had both. Pat Garrett used both. In practically every photograph of an armed man from the Old West, there's a Winchester somewhere in the frame. The nickname "the gun that won the West" was Winchester's own marketing from the 1880s. But when almost every notable shooter of the era was running the same rifle, the slogan had more substance than most slogans ever do. It's 150 years old and it still runs smoother than most things invented since. And as I say every chance I get, it's the coolest mechanism ever made. Sharps Model 1874. It's pretty simple. If I can shoot you from a distance you can't shoot back from, you've got a serious problem. The Plains Indians called it the shoots far gun. That wasn't a metaphor. The mechanism was so solid it could handle loads that would destroy any other rifle of the era. Buffalo hunters were dropping 900-kilogram animals at 400, 500 meters without spooking the rest of the herd. At those distances, the impact arrived before you understood where the shot came from. The Comanche learned to recognize the sound of the falling block closing. That was warning enough to pull back. In 1874, at the Battle of Adobe Walls, Billy Dixon borrowed a Sharps Point 50-90 and hit a Comanche warrior at 1,538 yards. Dixon himself called it luck. The warriors watched it happen and decided it was probably time to head home. The word sharpshooter comes from the men who used a Sharps during the Civil War. The gun went out of production in 1881. The name never did. If you doubt the quality, ask the Bison. Double-barrel shotgun. This gun was rarely fired. It was shown. The sound of two 12-gauge hammers being cocked in a quiet room ended most arguments before the first shot. Every saloon that had been open more than a week had one under the bar. Not for decoration, just pure logic. In a small room full of wood, glass, and drunk people, you don't need to hit something at 100 yards. You need presence. And these guns have that. To this day. Doc Holliday carried a sawed-off under his coat on top of everything else he had visible. Wyatt Earp, the sheriff, called Holliday the most dangerous man he ever met. But after what I just told you he was carrying, I think the reason's pretty easy to figure out. Remington rolling block. Every gun before this one has a famous name attached to it. The rolling block has none. It was the gun of the people whose names you never learned. And it dropped just as many buffalo as any of them, a curved block sitting behind the chamber. You cocked the hammer. The block rotated down and opened the chamber. You inserted the round, closed it, and the hammer itself locked the block in place. When it fired, the pressure had nowhere to go. In calibers like .45-70 or .50-70, depending on the load, it got close to what the Sharps delivered, in a package that buffalo hunters who couldn't afford a custom Sharps could actually buy. Remington sold around 1.5 million with this mechanism. More than 100 countries bought or licensed the design. In World War I, France was still ordering rolling blocks for second-line troops, 50 years after it launched, because they didn't have enough modern rifles to go around.